Morning. I'm Brenna Clanton. I am your worship lead today, and my pronouns are she and her. As we begin our service, I invite you to silence your phone, close other windows on your computer, take a deep breath, and center yourself for worship. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice. The words for our chalice lighting today come from Reverend Cynthia Landrum. For the wonder and inspiration we seek from sun and stars and all the lights of the heaven, we light this chalice.
Welcome to Accotink on this beautiful morning. I'm Judy Robison. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. This congregation is a welcoming and inclusive community that seeks to create a more just and compassionate world. If you're new to Accotink and would like to talk some more about the church, please be sure to reach out to our minister, Reverend William Levewood, or to one of today's greeters. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour, online and in person, immediately after the service. We're so delighted that you decided to join us today. Welcome, everyone. Our time for all ages today is from the book I Am Peace, a book of mindfulness by Susan Verde and art by Peter Reynolds. There are times when I worry about what might happen next and what happened before. The thoughts in my head are like rushing water, and I feel like a boat with no anchor. I feel like a boat with no anchor being carried away. I give myself a moment, I take a breath, and then I tell myself it's all right. I feel the ground beneath my feet, and I steady myself. And start to notice the here and the now. My thoughts begin to settle. My mind begins to clear. I am peace. I can watch my worries gently pop and disappear. I let things go. I can say what I feel inside out loud. I know myself. I can share kindness with others. I make a difference. I can hug a tree and thank it for its beauty and strength. I connect to nature. I can watch the clouds make shapes against the sky. I know wonder. I can taste and smell and touch and hear and see what is all around me. I use my senses. I can feel my breath fill my whole body. I tune into me. Now the water is still. I have found my anchor, and everything is all right. I don't need to worry about before and after. I am in this moment. I am peace. Now I share my peace with others and hope that it is carried away to those who need it. And I dream we are peace. The reading is a poem called Mending by Nancy Shafer. How shall we mend you, sweet soul? What shall we use? And how is it, in the first place, you've come to be torn? Come sit. Come tell me. We will find a way to mend you. I would offer you so much, sweet soul. This banana, sliced in rounds of palest yellow, atop hot cereal, or these raisins scattered through it, if you'd rather. I would offer cellos in the background singing melodies Vivaldi heard and wrote for us to keep. Would hold out to you everything colored blue and lavender or light green. All this I would offer you. All this I would offer you, sweet soul. All of it, or any piece of it, might mend you. I would offer you, sweet soul, this chair by the window, this sunlight on the floor, and the cat asleep in it. I would offer you my silence, my presence, all this love I have, and my sorrow you've become torn. How shall we mend you, sweet soul? With these, I think, gently we can begin. We will mend you with a rocking chair, some raisins, a cat, a field of lavender beginning now to bloom. We will mend you with songs remembered entirely for the first time ever they are heard. We will mend you with pieces of your own sweet self, sweet soul, with what you've taught from the beginning.
So there's a riddle that starts off, I'm aspired by all, yet hard to find. Does anybody want to maybe throw out what they think that's referencing? I'd like to invite you by doing this by saying there's no right or wrong answer. I am aspired by all, yet hard to find. And a little hint, sometimes when we do meditation, this is what we might be seeking. Peace. I heard peace, and I love that I heard it kind of just echoed. I really appreciate how the child in the Time for All Ages reading compared peace to feeling anchored in a boat. And that when peace isn't present, feels like that boat has capsized. So I often think about tools, and I often think about things in groups of 3. I do a lot with adult learning, and this is how my brain often tacks onto things. So we're going to talk about 3 tools today that I think are helpful. They're helpful for me to give me a sense of peace. And that's a body scan. We'll talk about breathing, and then we'll go back into RAIN, which is a meditation tool that Tara Brach is credited to Tara Brach, a meditation teacher, along with, she holds many other credits. As we talk about these tools, it might be helpful to check in with yourself. So an experiential sermon, if you will. I'll be giving some descriptions, and you are welcome to do these practices as we talk about it. For me, these are things I often think about as keeping in my back pocket so that if the need arises, I can just pull them out and in that moment I can take a breath. I can scan. I can run through RAIN. And I can return to them so that my boat doesn't capsize. So this sermon, and just a couple things that come to mind as I'm walking into this. This is the last of our sermons on mindfulness. So we've spent this month looking at this idea of mindfulness. Next month, we're going to go into some of the foundations of Unitarian Universalism. And I feel like these are all bridges. Bridges for us to connect with each other, with ourselves, and with the greater community. In my own spiritual journey, I think meditation, one of these things we talk about that can give us a sense of peace, it's something I initially shied away from. Curious if anybody else has ever had this. I never felt like I was doing it right. Wasn't doing it perfectly. I feel like our culture is preoccupied with perfectionism. And I also had an experience as a young adult where I was attending a Tibetan Buddhist center, and we were very scripted. There was an encounter I witnessed once with a newcomer to our guided meditation practice every Saturday morning. And I remember the newcomer asking, well, is it okay if I meditate on my back while lying down? And the monk thought for a moment and said, well, we recommend that you sit up while you meditate, that a straight back helps you keep focused on meditation. And the newcomer looked dubious and said, well, I have a really bad back. I meditate while lying down. And the monk shrugged and said, sort of dubiously himself, I guess you just do the best you can. I don't know if he really meant it, though. It felt judgy, if I can use that word in a sermon. And I was a young adult. I didn't have practice, much practice behind me. The monk was conveying there was a certain way to do this. And I remember being in those meditation rooms. We would go on retreat weekends, and we would be packed. And I would be afraid to move because that was not the right form, right? So full confession, I spend as much time lying down on my back while meditating these days than I do sitting on my meditation cushion. And if I fall asleep, and more accurately, it is when I fall asleep, my current meditation teacher reminds me that my body probably just needed the rest. I love how forgiving this practice has become for me. So as we go into this, I would invite yourself to be forgiving as well. Sometimes it is not just tools we have in our back pocket, but it is the community around us, the things around us, the pets around us. So recently I was going into a challenging week, and a friend asked me how I was going to keep myself grounded. Do you remember any of the things the child did in the reading today? There's a line that the child says, sometimes I feel the ground beneath my feet, and I steady myself. Tara Brach, in her book, True Refuge, recounts a time when she was just overwhelmed with sadness and grief. She had recently received a diagnosis of a genetic disease. There was no cure, and the only thing that she knew would help her, or that they were saying would help her get through her days, was just being on constant painkillers. And she, in this moment, was at her summer house in Cape Cod and had guests, and they were starting to leave. So the cars were pulling out, and she just had this sense of, how am I going to do this? And she writes, I didn't know if I could ever be happy living with a future of pain and physical limitations. While I was crying, Shayla, one of our standard poodles, sat down beside me and nudged me with concern. Her presence was comforting. It reconnected me to the here and now. After I stroked her for a while, we got up for a walk. She took the lead as we meandered along an easy path overlooking the bay. In the aftermath of grieving, I was silent and open. My heart held everything. The soreness in my knees, the expanse of sparkling water, Shayla, my unknown future, the sound of gulls. Nothing was missing, nothing was wrong. These moments of true refuge foreshadowed one of the great gifts of the Buddhist path, that we can be happy for no reason. We can love life just as it is. So this isn't limited to the practice of Buddhism. I know I've given a couple of examples that are centered on Buddhist practice. It is important that we all are able to accept life as it is, no matter our spiritual path. I love the image of Shayla nudging her owner. And while we may not have a dog next to us at all times to nudge us when we are overcome by our emotions, we can bring these nudges to ourselves by enlisting these simple practices. So the first of these tools is a body scan. Body scan can be very simple. Where am I right now? Being present, like the child in the book we read, can bring us back into our own physical self. So let's take a moment to picture this. If you'd like, you are welcome to close your eyes as I run through a simple body scan, or you can simply listen with your eyes open. As you breathe, take the attention to the top of your head and slowly bring it down to your eyes, your nose, and your chin. I sometimes picture this as a ray of warm light encompassing me. That light can make its way down my neck and into my chest area, spanning out into my arms, all the way to my fingers. It can then wrap itself around to my back and then down my hips to my legs and grounded into my feet. Firmly grounded, relaxed, at peace. A variation of a body scan is Yoga Nidra. Is there anyone here today, and those of you who are online, I can't see it right now, but feel free to raise your virtual hand. Anyone who has practiced Yoga Nidra before? I see some nods and hands. I thought this was an ancient practice, and I know there are others here who are more skilled and wise about the practice of yoga. It is a modern practice, and that was surprising to me. It was founded in 1973. I guess my kids would call that ancient. They call me ancient, so. By Dennis Boys. So it is meant to be a state of relaxation, kind of in between wakefulness and sleep. Although I have to say I have used it right before going to bed. So again, you're seeing a theme here. Meditation sometimes puts me to sleep, and Yoga Nidra certainly does. Like a body scan, it brings attention to the different parts of the body. Years ago, I took a hatha yoga class at one of our local rec centers. Not Yoga Nidra, but hatha yoga. And I'm sure many of us have experienced classes at these rec centers. They are often in rooms with a wall of glass, which can be helpful if you are there as a parent with a young child, and maybe there's a martial arts class or a dance class and you want to watch your child. It is not so helpful when you're doing yoga poses, including the corpse pose or savasana, that restorative yoga pose that is often done at the end of yoga. So our instructor, I took from her for many years, and she would always end us in savasana and read Mary Oliver. It was wonderful. And And so we would be there, the lights would be off, but that glass window, and swim team would let out across the hall. So trying to relax and hearing this chatter in the hallway. And I remember one night, very loud voice from a child, "Is that sleeping class?" It still makes me laugh. And so I now think of that class, not as the Hatha Yoga 1 and 2 that I took, but sleeping class. I didn't realize how much of a theme this was. So as my meditation teacher says, we all need our rest. Our second tool is another very simple one. It is returning to the breath. And I recently worked with a group of kids at a UU summer camp on belly breathing. I was almost worried. I was sharing with a family earlier today that I was worried that one of the kids would be here and actually correct me on this. So tell me what he really thought was happening in that group. Every morning when I worked with this group of youth, we would start outside in a circle, and some mornings I actually had them ground themselves in the breath. And so I would invite them to breathe into their bellies, and it's often helpful when you're teaching this to kids, but adults too, to say that you're expanding your belly like a balloon, and then you're letting the air out. I really feel like that act in itself was what was so calming to the kids. They probably can tell me other things or that I wasn't quite on point with that. But let's talk for a few moments about belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. I want to hold two things at the same time, that correct breathing is important, and if we overthink it, sometimes we undo, or we can overthink breathing, and then it kind of undoes the benefits it has. Being aware of our breathing can be powerful. So I was actually talking to a friend yesterday who shared a story that he was with his mother in the hospital, and she was having trouble breathing. And just the simple act of saying, "Mom, grab my hands, breathe with me." He was facing the monitors, she couldn't see them, but just the change in a couple of breaths started to bring some of the oxygen levels up. It was pretty powerful to hear. If you take a moment to observe your breath, what is expanding? So an idea is if it's just your shoulders that lift up and your chest that expands, then you are likely doing what is called vertical breathing. And for years, I used to do this and think, well, I'm opening the chest more. I'm breathing, I'm deeply breathing. But that I was just breathing at the top of my lungs, not getting it all the way down. So instead, by inhaling where your belly expands, you're drawing oxygen all the way down to your lungs. And this is called horizontal breathing. Can anyone guess why we sometimes tend more towards the vertical, just the top part? You're welcome to call out if there's any reason that has shown up for you or that you are aware of. I'll give you the top three. Stress, and I'm guilty of all of these. Stress, poor posture, sometimes weight gain will affect it. Breathing, our belly breathing can be practiced so that we can unlearn. So again, not overthinking, but if you do this, and again, feel free if you wish, you can put one hand just at the bottom of your rib cage, one hand on the belly, and just watch that belly expand, being aware of it. If you're ever doing this with kids, one of my favorite resources, PBS Kids, they actually say you can lie down and put a book on your belly. And that's a good visual. Thing I love about this practice is that I can't engage in it and be in fight or flight mode at the same time. So again, it's that thing, if I'm really outside of where I'm comfortable, simply coming back. So I could feel that energy slow down when I was with that circle of kids. I also witnessed an adult at that same summer camp talking to a group of us, a large group. It was in gathering. And her talk, Leslie, you may remember this part. I think you were there too. But she got up and she stood and said, I need to start by asking everybody in the room to take 3 deep breaths, because I need that too. The auditorium quickly became a sea of silence. We breathed together. And afterwards, it felt like a sea of calm. It was so powerful. And again, it really helped the speaker, as she said, to ground herself. So the last tool, the third tool, I want to turn to the mnemonic phrase, rain, developed by Tara Brach. So we're not really asking you to go out, put your head up and feel the raindrops, right? This is just a tool. But as I mentioned during the meditation, it's recognize what's going on. The A is allow. So just simply allow, acknowledging the truth in the situation. She actually says, and I heard her in an interview say, if it's something small, maybe it's just raw, and then I can move on. But if it is something that's deeper, maybe there is a need for investigation. And this is just simply a deepening of the allowing. She also uses another I word here, intimacy. And I'll share a little bit more about what that means, but it's just, I think for me, connecting either with myself or the other person, allowing people to be vulnerable, including myself. And then the non-identity is that you don't attach any story to it. So if I'm feeling crabby, the non-identity, I'm not a bad person. I'm just simply somebody who right now in this moment has some additional needs. So I recently had an experience. I've recently transitioned in jobs, and so I am in sort of this training period, and there was a miscommunication, a big miscommunication. And I had to have a challenging follow-up conversation I did not want to have. And as that conversation progressed, I found myself pointing the finger at me. There was one other person that I was getting the blame. And so if you take this acronym, R, I was recognizing, where I was in this moment. I was feeling pretty crummy about myself and just allowing that. So I was allowing that some other people might be inconvenienced by the fact that this piece of information wasn't included. And in investigating that further, at one point the other person said, we can't fix this. I was still trying to fix something that couldn't be undone. Can't fix this, let's just find a solution. I don't want to say it was, I'm still not 100% with it, and that's okay. It didn't solve it for me, but just it brought me back to what can I do now in the moment, and possibly what can I learn. I can tell you everything I do this point on has been in writing, and that was not what I did earlier. But I feel like in that moment, in that conversation, having a tool like RAIN can help guide me. I was going down so many rabbit holes, things I couldn't even change. And then I'll offer one last story. So this idea that RAIN isn't just by myself, but maybe with one other person. And so I'll bring back that experience I had at the summer camp. I had an opportunity to work with a child who was having a really tough week. And it felt like every time there was an interaction, there was this feeling of being threatened and as a result, some reactivity. So on the last day of camp, I was having a conversation with the child and their parent and another staff member. And as I'm hearing the other staff member recount what had happened, the who, the what, the where, I could feel the energy within this group. I could feel some discomfort of the child. And in that moment, I actually moved to sit next to the child, and we connected. We looked each other in the eye, and all I was able to say, and we can go through the letters in a moment, but just, it sounds like you had a really hard week. And I didn't have any expectation. But in that moment, the child looked at me, and there were tears. And the child was able to say, "Nobody likes me." So if I go back to the rain, I'm recognizing where I am in this present moment. I'm aware these things all happened. But we were in that investigation, weren't we? What is really going on? There was nothing to fix in that moment. But the non-identity, this was not, I remember as a parent when my kids were young, hearing bad child, good child, we put labels on a lot of things. And that is the power of this tool. This is somebody who walks into a room and just makes that assumption that the whole world is against them. How hard. And I was able to sit with that. I think the one thing that I come from that, I'm still obviously processing that situation. It's bringing up emotions. I think the only thing I say sort of in reflection to that is I hope we were able to shine a light so that when that family returned from that summer camp experience, that maybe they had some next steps or things that they could do going forward. And I think the only other thing I share is obviously it doesn't mean that there were no consequences for the actions. There were. But I want to say they were done with love and concern for the entire community. So I'd like to close, and I started earlier, I think I shared in a candle of joy just how much, I know for many of us, the soul matters, small groups, and this was something that was shared to me in a recent Soul Matters group. It's a poem from one of our packets. It is a poem entitled "Walk, Don't Run." So I'll just read a few stanzas as I close. So this is "Walk, Don't Run" by Rob Bell. Slow down, breathe deeply, and open your eyes. The bush doesn't suddenly catch on fire. It's been burning the whole time. Moses is simply moving slowly enough to see it, and when he does, he takes off his sandals. Not because the ground has suddenly become holy, but because he's just now becoming aware that the ground has been holy the whole time. May you have the chance to slow down, to take that deep belly breath, to turn towards rain, and see the holiness that has been present here this whole time. Blessed be. Amen.
I invite you to join me now in our community blessing as our chalice is extinguished today. These are the words of David Bumbaugh. You may remain seated. Well, let's stand and greet each other. And be thinking, visualizing when we can join together in a big circle around the room. I always like that moment. And these are our words. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes, in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars, we pause now in silent witness to that unity.
In the words of Nancy Shafer, how shall we mend you, sweet soul? We will mend you with pieces of your own sweet self, with what you've taught from the beginning. So go forth, breathe into your most expansive self, and let it rain. Blessed be. Amen.